Hello and welcome to Journey Lines, the podcast answering the question, how did they get there? I'm your host, Kim Minnick. Each episode, I invite a guest to complete a reflective exercise, plotting key moments of their life and career against a line of neutrality. Together, we explore the ups, downs, and everything in between on their journey. With that, I am so excited to welcome today's guest, Laurel Farrer. Laurel, how are you today?
I'm so good. How are you, Kim?
I am doing so well. Before we dive into your journey line, tell me a little bit about what's taking up your time today, personally, professionally, holistically.
We'll talk about this in the journey line, but right now I'm just consulting and working on a lot of research, which I'm finding to be very exciting. But as of today, this recording, it is the last day of the school year for my kids. So that's where my headspace is changing
Oh,
up the workplace environment of my career for the next few months.
I have only heard tales of Maycember and like
That's it.
sliding into the end of the year, just super, super busy.
Yep. It's been a journey for the past for the past month, and but all good things. Getting ready for a very balanced and exciting summer of good professional
Ah,
progress, but also good personal progress as well.
I love this. I have no idea when we'll publish this episode, but I hope you have a great summer and maybe we'll have some show notes with some tales. Um,
Sales.
With that, well, let's go ahead and dive into your journey line. Let me bring it up for us, for those watching. So, kick us off. Where are we at in time and space? Kind of give us our starting point.
Yeah. So, what I just mentioned of the consulting and research, that's where you'll see on the far right end of the screen, which is what I'm doing right now. But this is what most people don't know about me. And frankly, what's never come up in a podcast interview before is that on the far left side of the screen is where I started my career, which was as an interior designer. So, that does not come up very often because I'm so visible in operations management and remote work optimization. That origin story kind of surprises people.
Well, let's dive in. Tell me a little bit about your origin story. What got you interested in interior design? How was working in it an early career?
Yeah, I it was one of those things that I think it was 14 when I made a floor plan in one of my classes. What is that class called in middle school that's like teaching you
Home
about
ec?
different careers? Yeah, like home ec and I can't remember. Anyway, whatever that class
No.
was that apparently changed my life.
At least the early stage of it, certainly.
I we were exploring all of these different careers, doing a bunch of different exercises of like what it was like to be a pilot, what it was like to be, a construction foreman, and we did one for an interior designer, and it just clicked. Like that was it. My heart was gone. It was math, which I loved, the drafting side of it. It was color and art, which I loved. I've always been a very right brain, left brain balanced person, and
Mhm.
that was just yeah, I was 14 and I never looked back. I absolutely loved it. And to the point that I was so ambitious about it that I actually got jobs as an interior designer during high school, internships and apprenticeships. And so by the time I graduated from high school, I was ready to enter the workforce. And studied interior design in college for a little bit, but worked at the same time. So yeah, this journey line starts very early. I was 18 when I got my first, full-time salaried employment role. And that was really exciting and it gave me a long runway to work with.
Th Absolutely amazing. I love that you, like, found that passion so early, and I love that you talked about balancing the right brain and the left brain. I
Mhm.
think we often, like, "I'm left-brained, I'm right-brained, I only do this, I only do that," but that balance is just
Yes.
gorgeous and probably why it works so well for a visual art that needs
Yeah.
measuring.
Yeah, but it was as I got into interior design that both of those sides were not exercised. So the vision of
Mm.
design was exactly what I wanted it to be, that balance of the right brain and left brain. But as I started exercising, it was mostly sales. And I was like, oh,
Right.
I hate this. Like no, I didn't do this for to, sell furniture. Like what? Um, and so that kind of led me into my next phase, which is on the journey line, which is saying like, okay, well, how can I scratch this itch? How can I do both sides? And that took me to event coordination. And when I was doing event coordination for corporate brands, like, YouTube and Airbnb, that was a blast. And that is what helped me feel both sides. I was doing the creative production side, but also the logistical side. So, because I had office management experience from my work as a designer, that led me into operations management. So it was operations management, but for creative industry. I was also working
Cool.
as an event producer, and that gave me options that I could move exclusively into just services industry, or I could maintain that through line of operations management, which is what I chose to do. So the
Nice.
operations management has been essentially the spine of my entire career. And that's really, really what I love to do. And I still get that right brain, left brain balance because I'm doing such creative work. It's not necessarily visual art like I expected it to be, but well, sometimes it is. There's a whole lot of presentation decks.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of workflow designs, and I still get to do that creative aspect, but just with a different medium. And I love it. The things that we would never dream of being when we're 14, like, "Ooh, I wanna be an organizational behaviorist," you know?
I wanna do operations. There was a commercial a long time ago, and it was making fun of this, and kids are like, "I wanna be a middle manager." Very much that vibe. And I see on your journey line along this way, we have a marriage and a baby number 1.
Yes, so those also came much earlier than I anticipated in my life. I was Family and domestic responsibilities were just not on my radar. I was such a career-driven person. And so when these happened, I thought, "Okay, well, that's okay, like, I can integrate this into my life." Uh, Except for when my daughter was born. That was the real push. So it
Mm,
was no pun intended. It was when I was doing operations management at that time, there was starting to be this pattern of workplace flexibility. I did
okay,
not have the language for that at the time. Very few people
okay.
did have the language for this at the time. This is
Mhm.
2007, 2008.
Okay.
And so but the previous 2 jobs that I had a major element of workplace flexibility, either moving locations or having a hybrid team or having a remote team. Again, none of the words for that, but there was something there that was
Your
similarness.
office looked different.
Yes, and I was like, "I think that there's something there for the world, for
Mm,
business, and for me personally." And so that's when I started leaning into like how can this be a solution for more people like me that needed to move earlier than anticipated or unexpectedly, that did have a family unexpectedly,
mm.
but I can still maintain my career consistency because of workplace flexibility. So that moment of having my daughter and being a very um kind of putting my own career together really was what pushed me into the foundation of what my career is now, which is remote work thought leadership.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's where the freelancing came from, is essentially researching with small business owners and startups and saying, "Hey, this is working remotely and not having an office is a way that you can really save a lot of money and be much more profitable in your in these very critical stages of business growth. Is that something that you'd like me to help you with?" So I was essentially like a fractional COO, but also an operations consultant as a freelancer, and that was how I collected research, and I exercised this theory and gained a lot of experience, while also learning how to be a mom and learning how to balance kind of
Casual?
yeah, construct my personal life and construct my professional life.
So I am not a mother, but I have had the pleasure of watching a lot of, new parents try and find that balance.
Mhm.
And I see like in your journey line going into the freelancer, we're dipping down a little bit. We're below the line of
Mhm.
neutrality. I imagine it is a wildly hectic, confusing time. So tell me a little bit about like this dip going into freelance world, finding clients, learning how to be a new mom, learning a new family dynamic. What was that like?
Yeah, I think it was just the emotional challenge of finding a place. Again, this is 2007 to like 2012. And I was such an ambitious person. I mean, like we already talked about, and so I thought that my career was going to be the corporate ladder. And I was so
Mhm.
excited about that and I was so dedicated to that. And so emotionally trying to stay as dedicated to my career as I was to my family was incredibly difficult and felt impossible. There was not a
Mm.
place for me at the time to grow as an executive and grow as a mom. It was pretty much impossible at that time. And but I'm a fixer, I'm an operations manager. My job
Sure.
is to find problems and fix them. And so it was that journey that for me personally, as well as socioeconomically, I was determined to find a way to do this, to find a way to, yes, be a corporate executive and be a kick-ass mom. And it was but it was hard. That's not to say
Yeah.
like, yes, now I've achieved it and it's great, but that's not to say it was easy. It was I was scary and it was
Mhm.
frustrating and I felt invisible and I felt misunderstood and it was just like constantly fighting for the next client, fighting to negotiate, fighting to prove that this was a possibility for me to complete these engagements from home. And it was a battle. It was
Yeah.
exciting and I loved it, but that's not to say it was easy.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started. It's kind of like sometimes it's hard and it's awful and it sucks, but like this hard is better than the alternative. I'll go through this hard.
Yes.
Um, what kept you going during that time? I imagine this is kind of a lonely, isolating experience. You're endeavoring on a new business, you're a new mom. Where did you find support?
Mm. Um Spite, to be honest.
Hey, I'm here for it. Spite fuels me.
We're we're being transparent. It was just the belief that I wanted this to happen for me, and I knew that it should happen for a lot of people like me.
Oh,
It was a lot of spite of my culture saying, "No, you need to be a stay-at-home mom. That's the most important thing in the world." And me saying, "That is important, but I believe that I can contribute in different ways as well." And so
right.
it was sheer spite of saying, the world is saying one thing, my community is saying one thing, but I know myself, I trust my instinct, and I'm just going to keep going. I believe that there's a way to do both, and I'm not going to rest until I can help make it happen for myself and for others.
I love that because being a mother is not your whole identity. Like you are that amongst so many other things.
Yes, and for business operations too. I did not mention the entire time of being a remote work thought leader until about 2 years ago. I never mentioned that I had kids. It was a very
Wild.
unusual feeling to put my kids on this journey timeline because I never, ever, ever brought them up. Nobody knew that I had kids because if I
Mm.
did, then that's all that people would see about me is that I'm this young woman that wants to stay home with her babies. And I was
I'm a
like,
working
"No."
mom who wants to stay home and still
Yes.
get money.
Yes, but my
Gross.
experience came
Mhm.
I should say my experience in virtual operations as well as my credibility in the topic came from the time of my career before I got married or had children. It was all about like, whoa, I see something that is really revolutionary,
Yeah.
exciting and valuable in the world of business operations. This is what I want to investigate. This is what I want to dedicate my career to. Then I had kids and I was like, well, sink or swim. Like, okay,
Mhm.
like, let's figure out how to do both this advocacy and consulting and create flexibility that enables me to have a more balanced and flexible life. So I never mentioned that I had kids because I wanted people to hear the only words out of my mouth were about business. And that was a big sacrifice. It was a
Yeah.
bummer to keep my balanced life invisible like that, but it was, I think, a very important sacrifice for people to for my mission to be accomplished and for people to hear that remote work really is about business objectives, not about personal objectives.
Everything about that is just stunning. I feel like, at least since I've been in the HR profession, we've talked a lot about bringing your whole self to work and bringing your best self to work. But I am sure you are not the only mother in the world who has said, "You know what? I'm going to live a bit of a double life."
Yeah.
Or, so many other employees who have so many different, identities and pieces of this themselves that they don't want to risk their career or
Yeah.
their profession or their income based
Mhm.
off of that.
Mhm.
Um, well, during this time, looking at your journey line again, you have baby number 2, and we start climbing that ladder. We're going a
Yeah.
little bit higher, and we have you as a consultant, like, kind of towards the we're riding
Yeah.
high.
Yeah, so this is kind of where I figured it out, right? The freelancing upgraded into consulting. And so there was
Okay,
steady gigs, and this is where there was a clear direction for yes, there is a thing about what I'm working on. And this is really where the language came to fruition. So this is where I
mm,
found a very small community at the time. So this is like 2015-ish.
okay.
That the term remote work was just starting to be a thing. And so this is where I was able to find other people because we shared that language. And so there was this tiny little community that was gathering together and we were trying to unite with each other and share information with each other. And this is also when I started consulting more regularly as with the goal of consulting with a big four firm. So I
Cool.
kept approaching consulting agencies and consulting firms saying, hey, I think that there's this future in workplace flexibility and virtual operations. And I think that, I can help you build some services around that. And of course, all of them at the time were like, no, 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 this will never amount to a thing. This doesn't exist. And so again, fueled by spite, I was like,
Fueled by
nope,
spite.
it is a thing. I'm going to prove to you that this is a thing. So I went wherever I needed to relied on those freelancing skills to find engagements enough to stitch together a portfolio. And then I could prove to them in a few years, like, look at the work that I've done. I think that there's a potential for you too. So yeah, consulting was really where I found that groove for myself personally, professionally, and everything felt like it had a direction.
Yeah, I like how you call out kind of growing freelance into consulting. I think there's a
Mhm.
lot of folks out today who are starting an independent journey, and it can
Mhm.
be frustrating at times. Uh, speaking from experience, but totally speaking from experience,
Yes.
it's nice to think about like, hey, sometimes there's a freelancer baby step before we get to that thought leadership consulting.
Yes,
Um, Now,
absolutely.
during
Independent
this time,
contractor.
oh,
Yeah, independent contractor is very different than consultant, which is very
mhm.
different than consulting firm. So understanding the differences between those um, helped me and then helped create this journey. But yeah, we'll see in the next step that the natural next step was from consultant to expand into consulting firm. And that did not go like I
Mm.
expected it to go.
So, and while you were building your consultant life, before we dive into
Yeah.
firm, you were nomadic. So, you were
Yep.
location independent with a
Yep.
family,
Hmm.
and eventually decided to move to Connecticut. Tell me a little bit about that. How was traveling with a family? How was nomadic life?
Yeah, it was awesome. It again, ahead of the curve. So
Yep.
we took a lot of flack from a lot of people because we were seen as very irresponsible, very maybe dangerous for our for our
That's
kids.
spite fuel. That's just fuel for the spite,
Right,
baby.
and we were like, I mean, and then nomadism wasn't a thing yet, it didn't have a name, so there was so many times that my husband Brett and I are looking at each other like, "Maybe we are terrible parents. Maybe," like, "Oh man, what are we doing? We just thought it would be fun to go here for a while," and we can because we work remotely, so logically it makes sense, but logically it also doesn't make sense. So I think we would feel a lot more comfortable doing it now. But yeah, at the time it was, I mean, this is a decade ago, right? So like it was a little iffy, but ultimately we ended because our kids were getting a little bit older. Our daughter was
Mhm.
in about 4th grade at the time, and we
Okay.
looked at her. She's very, very social, and we were like, I think it's time to plant roots. Like, it's time to give her the gift of
Mm.
consistency of friends, consistency of community, and especially like the level of education was getting to the point that we were like, yeah, this isn't like easy to homeschool anymore. This is going to require a lot more investment than
Yeah.
maybe we have the time or attention to give with 2 full-time jobs. So we wanted to plant roots. We That was part of the nomadism, was moving around the United States and figuring out what was good for us culturally, and
Yeah.
eventually settled in New England here in Connecticut, and absolutely love it. So yeah, we're here to give our kids the roots of community for the time that they're in middle school and high school, and then as soon as they're graduated, we'll probably go nomadic again.
Ah, amazing. I love the nomadic community. I've been so fortunate to be able to meet people like you, Darcy, Allie. There's some just
Right.
great humans out there. And I'm excited for that. Maybe we'll do another journey line in a few
Yeah,
years and see where
yeah.
you're at. Um, all right. So back to work life. You're
Mhm.
crushing it as a consultant, and you're like, it is time to grow and expand. Step into your seat as the CEO.
Yes.
Let's
The
talk
great
about it.
honor. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, really, in hindsight, that's where I did myself the disservice of not plotting my career based on what I knew was a good choice. That was where I
Oh.
plotted my career based on what was expected of me. So, when I was a consultant, the natural, logical next step was to expand my consultancy into a consulting firm. That was the next stage of growth. That's what made sense. And so there was a lot of experimentation there of combining with other consultants and trying to figure out a revenue model. There was just, I mean, never before had a consulting firm been built based on remote work. So there was a
Yeah.
lot of flying blind and a lot of mistakes made. Um, and, but along the way, I just felt this pressure and just expectation of like, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I was a consultant. Now I'm a CEO. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so from the very beginning, now, again, in hindsight, from the beginning, I knew that being a CEO was not right for me. But at the time, I
Mhm.
was just like, no, it's fine. I'll just, there's that spite again. I'll just get
It's
through it and
fine.
I'll just keep going. Yeah, like, it's fine. I'm fine. We're fine. Let's keep going. And
Everything's fine.
yeah, everything's fine. Everything's on fire, but everything's fine. And then, so I was getting to that point of, I think, being admitting to myself of like, this is not a good fit. What am I doing? Right? Like, let's
Mhm.
pull the plug. And it was February 2020 when my team and I were really ready to pull the plug. We were starting
I
those
mean, like,
conversations.
no companies were preparing to go remote in February 2020.
No, and that's what we were
And
learning,
then
like, there's just not the market demand, like, this has been fun, but right?
a casual 30 days later,
And there it is. And, our market demand, I I I cannot even describe to you what happened in March of 2020. It was, we didn't have a choice of, thinking about what we wanted or if this was a good fit anymore. We just went to work. Um, our lead generation increased by like 7,000% in a week. Like, it was just bananas. And
Man.
we
I
didn't
mean, people would
know.
kill for those growth numbers in startup land if it wasn't for that whole pesky pandemic thing.
Right. Well, and it was just so complicated because nobody knew what they needed, and we didn't know what they needed because what we had been providing prior to the pandemic was proactive change management services, which means
Mhm.
you have like a year or two of planning and piloting and figuring out, like, is this a possibility for us? So never had we taken a company remote overnight before. And so we were trying to figure out how we do this.
Mhm.
And it was uh it was bananas. So we'll
I bet.
just, we'll skip through the mud and blood and sweat and tears there, but it
Yada,
was
yada,
yeah,
yada.
it was a
Yeah.
minimum of 100 hours of work per week, very little sleep, absolutely no self-care, eating sometimes, um,
Mm.
and just working my ass off and just delivering the services as well as trying to keep my team aligned and feeling the constant pressure of responsibility during that. So the CEO role being at the very, very bottom of this timeline is there's a lot of things that went into that.
Mhm.
Obviously, just the pressure of demand, the pressure of accountability to my team and leadership, and also being a CEO, which I learned
Yeah.
not good for me. I hate being a CEO. Like, if I put a job description of a CEO down, I hate it. Like that none of that I want to do. So why it took me so many years to admit like, "Oh, guess what? Like I actually hate this." It took too long and it was a
Yeah,
hard lesson to learn. But
I
once
bet.
I created that permission for myself of like, "Oh, I hate this. I don't have to do this anymore. And I don't want to do this anymore," and created my exit strategy. I still am the owner of the company. I'm able to do the part that I love, which is
I love that.
turns out why I started to be a consultant in the first place was to be a consultant, not to be a CEO. So once I created that path for myself, that's when things just started to improve again. And
Yeah.
I got back to the work that I love and the work that brings me fulfillment and brought me back to that work life balance.
So you find I think this is important as people think about growing their careers. Certainly when I was getting into the offices, I was like, "Oh, you have to become a manager, and then a manager becomes this, and then this is this,
Yeah,
and this is CEO." And what I'm hearing from you is I tried that route, and actually I've decided more of this independent, high partnership, individual contributor model is better for me. Am I understanding that?
absolutely. Yep. Having
Beautiful.
somebody to report to is really motivating for me
Mm,
and takes a lot of responsibility off of me. I'm a
mm,
very sensitive and empathetic person. And so if I feel like I am at the end of the line of decision making and
yeah,
responsibility, I take it very, very seriously and it can be very debilitating for me. So
mhm.
having frankly a bit of a scapegoat that I'm like, I'll work my brains out here, but at the end of the day, it's not my problem. Like they get to decide or, like
Thanks, boss.
blame them. Yeah.
See ya.
Then it was great for me. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the freedom that I needed. So yeah, I mean, we see
Cool.
this so much in human resources, right? That we see, a great engineer performing really, really well in like lines of code developed. And so we're like, good job. Now you become a manager. And it's like, those are totally different social skills. Those are
Yep,
totally different
yep,
output and result rubrics. And
yep.
we're saying that great technical skill then somehow translates or the next step of it is into great social skill. And it's like, that's not always compatible.
It's not
So,
always true, and we see it in
yeah,
sales, and
exactly.
we see it in people operations. Sometimes a great HR business partner is not the same as a great leader of a function. I think, like, we underrate the individual contributor path and how beautiful it can be.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, part of the bittersweetness of this journey map and to having been an entrepreneur and a consultant and a freelancer and well, I should say an independent contractor and then an entrepreneur
Yeah.
during most of it is that I was my own career development department. I didn't have a human resources partner that was looking out
Mhm.
for my growth, looking out for my earning potential, looking out for my growth map. Like nobody was
Yeah.
doing that for me. And so it was a lot of self-learning, self-advocacy, and self-construction to say, like, okay, what do I want? So I think if I
Cool.
had an HR consultant somewhere along the way that was like, guess what, a CEO, let's think about the pros and cons before stepping into that role, that would have been great. But I didn't. So I had to learn that lesson independently.
Well, you learned it, and then
Yeah.
you decided to not do that anymore. Walk me through, like, I feel like all of us have been in a decision or in a role or done something because other people expected us for it.
Mhm.
And then we say, "I'm not gonna do this anymore." And it's a
Yeah.
hard decision, but sometimes it's like, I think you said, a weight off of you. Tell me
Mhm.
a little bit about your journey there.
Yeah, it was incredibly liberating. I mean,
Mhm.
right now I feel happier and healthier than I have in years and years and years because I feel like I'm doing the work that I love. What's unusual about that is the assumptions, or I don't know, the judgment of others.
Mhm.
There's oftentimes that I'm like talking to somebody about a consulting gig and they see that I've been a CEO and they're like, oh, you're overqualified. Or there's people that hear this journey and they're like, well, wait, you were a CEO and now you're a consultant? Like, what went wrong? So it's like,
Ooh.
yeah, so there's a lot of judgment of like, because I didn't follow that traditional path, or I've chosen
Mhm.
not to. It's hard to explain that to other people. And it's hard to be like, look, I'm going to give you better work because I'm not the CEO, or I'm a better person because I'm not the CEO. Like it's hard to convey that as accurately as I would like to, but at the end of the day, I don't care because I'm happier and healthier. So I'm like, you know what, man? Judge away. I'm gonna go take a bath.
I get a flavor of that. Like, people have asked me, "Well, you were a VP,
Mhm.
you were that, and now you're on your own.
Yes.
What happened?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Well, a lot of stuff happened, but, like, I have chosen this route at this point. This is what feels great for my journey and my future and my vision
Yeah.
and how I wanna build my life."
Yes, and it's at
Um
this point too. That's another thing that I
Mhm.
get uncomfortable with when there's such polarization. Like, oh, you've been a consultant, and so you've got to. It's the consulting world versus the corporate world, and so now you're on our team.
Mhm.
Or there's contracting versus employment, or whatever. Like, there's all these different teams, and you have to choose sides. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm at a phase that I'm like, yeah, I'm a consultant, but I've been a consultant for over 15 years. Maybe employment would be really good for a little while. Like, it would be more stable. It would provide benefits that I haven't had
Mhm.
the access to for so many years. And for the phase of life that I'm in, and for the phase of life that my family is in, yeah, that could be really fun for me. To be honest, like, even remote work is more flexible in my mind as an employment benefit because of the phase of life that I'm in. When my
Mhm.
kids were little, absolutely not negotiable. But right now, everybody's driving themselves and doing their own thing, and I'm like, can I afford to be in a fixed location from 9 to 5 every day? Yeah. So, like, your life changes,
Mhm.
your priorities change. Why
Mhm.
shouldn't our careers change with it?
Preach. Preach. I am speechless at how good that is, because our journeys do change, our seasons of life change, our needs change, our wants change, and, like, the environment that we set up for ourselves change, and I think
Yeah.
that's why I'm very much on this path of, like, "Hey, employers, let's look at flexibility and how we
Yeah.
can actually, like, prioritize the human." What a strange idea.
Right. It's just, and for you and I, it's just such a no-brainer. And as I've been going through the past few months, I, I'm just thinking about what is next for me. Because, like I
Yeah.
said, yes, I'm in this consulting role, but I'm feeling that call a little bit of
Mm.
I'm going back in my career, and which is awesome, and I'm back to doing what I love. but what's next? And that has been incredibly vulnerable and incredibly
Mm.
fascinating to think about as an exercise because I'm me. As I always have a plan. I always know what is 30 years out. And I was on that plan. I was
Yeah.
checking off the boxes in 2018, 2019. I knew that the next 30 years of my career were going to be dedicated to remote work advocacy. Fast forward to 2024 when that advocacy is not needed anymore. Turns out
Yeah.
everybody's aware of it now. Are we all aligned on what the pros and cons of workplace flexibility are? No, there's still work to
No.
be done, but we're all aware of it. So
We're all
that
talking
goal,
about it. We have the
exactly.
language.
Yes. Yeah. The fact that everybody in the world now knows what Zoom is and now knows what the term remote work is, like
Yeah.
that literally was my 30-year goal.
Way to
So
crush it. Really got ahead of
thank
schedule
you.
there.
It turns out I didn't have much to do with it, but here we are. And so
Yep.
now I'm like looking around like, "Oh, shit. What am I supposed to do now?" Like that was
Mm.
my plan. And now I'm in, the thought leader of this industry that I never thought would exist in my lifetime. What do I do with that? What opportunities are there that are going to be constructed, and what do I want to do in all of that? So it's been kind of going back to this whole journey timeline and going back to the very beginning to my 18-year-old self and being like, what do I want to do? What's fun for me? What am I good at? What am I not good at? And it's been really vulnerable, but really exciting to have like that fresh canvas in front of me and not have any expectations, not even be on a
Yeah.
specific career path or ladder to climb. It's just kind of this open space in front of me, and I get to think about what's next and what do I want to do. And it's equally as scary as it is exciting.
Ah, resonates deeply. Have you any sort of fuzzy vision or hazy vision about what's next, or are you still exploring?
Yeah, that's why I'm conducting a lot of research right now.
Great.
I know what excites me, which is organizational behavior. That's always been my thing. That's why I went into
Yeah.
operations management. And so I love organizational behavior and people operations, but exactly what I want to do with that, and what kind of role that looks like for me, I don't know. I know that it won't be a CEO, I'll tell you that. But other than that, I don't know.
Oh my gosh, Laurel, thank you so much for taking us through your journey line, for sharing the ups, downs, all of your milestones, and so many nuggets of wisdom. I just absolutely loved this. Any sightseeing spots that we missed or anything else you want to let the audience know about?
I think that this was just such an incredible exercise to go through. I think
Good.
as we think about our journey lines independently, we tend to just naturally think about the successes or only showcase the successes.
That's right.
And as I was going through this exercise, I really was profoundly grateful for the tough lessons that I learned.
Mhm.
And I was able to laugh about them and accept them more easily now that time has passed. And I wish that I would have had that grace for myself much
Yeah.
earlier in my career, that I would have given myself permission to fail and recognize lessons in those failures as opposed to just feeling like I was doing something wrong and being so embarrassed and so disappointed in myself, but instead focusing on, all right, well, what's the lesson to learn from this and how am I going to pivot as a result of this?
Yeah, but it's hard to learn a lesson when you're in it. That's why
Yeah.
we do, reflections and think about it. Well, again, thank you so much. I love this. I can't wait to do this again in 5 years and
Yeah.
see how things
Yeah. We'll
change.
see.
But thank you so much, Laurel. Thanks, everyone.